Gotta keep them separated.
Welcome to the Final Girls podcast, where we explore the intersections of horror, film, and feminism. I'm Anna. I'm the co-founder of the Final Girls Collective and your podcast host. And if you have any passing interest in horror, the only thing that anyone's been talking about for the past month really has been the Fear Street trilogy. And this episode is the last of our deep dives into Fear Street, specifically Fear Street 1666, which just got released on Netflix yesterday. And I'm joined in this episode by writer and actor Zora Berber Brown and lecturer Dr. Alison Pierce, who both individually spoke with me about the first and the second installments in the Fear Street trilogy. And here we join forces and really deep dive into the last one, into Fear Street 66, but also talk about the trilogy in general, how it worked, the way that it was released, the way that it was marketed, the characters, what we expected, and how we got surprised and outsmarted by the series. Suffice to say, the entirety of this episode is completely spoilerific from the very start, not just of Fear Street 1666, but of the entire trilogy. And if you haven't seen any of the films, if you haven't seen the last one, perhaps, go and watch them and then listen to this episode. But that's entirely up to you. And if you do want to listen to our thoughts on the first two films, those are also on this feed. Plus, have an exclusive interview with Fear Street director and co-writer Lee Janiak that I released just yesterday on this very feed. I'll link to all of that in the show notes. I should also say, if you're interested in finding out more about the Final Girls, you can find out all about our work online at thefinalgirls.co.uk. Subscribe, rate, review the podcast. We're currently prepping our next full season, so any reviews or ratings on Apple Podcasts really help people discover the show in between seasons, and we'd really, really appreciate that. We also publish bonus episodes over on our Patreon. That's patreon.com/thefinalgirls. Find us there and subscribe to our weekly newsletter for original and newly commissioned essays on horror, film, TV, and culture. And with all of that said, please enjoy our deep dive into Fear Street 1666. Welcome, both of you. Alison, Zora.
Hello.
Hello.
It's rare that we do three-way episodes on this podcast, but I'm always really excited when we do manage to do one. So I'm chuffed that this has come together, where Zora, you and I spoke about 1994, and Alison, you and I spoke about 78, and now we all come together to talk about the finale of the Fear Street trilogy.
Yes. This is actually my second Final Girls three-way, so I'm actually an old pro now, so
You are.
Oh no, and I'm the innocent new one, so you'll have to be gentle.
Well, as per usual with me, this got dirty very quickly. It's not
Sorry.
It's not even a minute of recording, and we've already made this into a threesome conversation.
Totally.
Staying on brand, Anna. So bringing it back to Fear Street, I wanted to ask you both, after you'd seen the first two films, what were your expectations for the final one?
I was, of all three of them, I was least looking forward to this one. And there are reasons for this. I've read a lot of stuff about witches in the 1600s, like the Daylight Gate novel, Burial Rites, and I've watched quite a lot of stuff set in original witchy times. And so much of witchcraft, the original witchcraft, not 90s witches, is just about the patriarchy. And it's just about destroying women and the patriarchy. So I was like, it might be a bit grim.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm not as excited about this. I kind of want it to be the 90s or the 70s again. but it wasn't what I expected when I actually watched it. So I don't know what you thought to it, Zora. I don't know how you felt about coming into it.
I think I was the same as you. Like, I remember when me and Anna talked about the first one, and obviously, like, a big thing about the 90s one is the music, and the 70s one, there's, like, these very specific aesthetics and looks and things that you're expecting that are, like, exciting. And I was like, and then 1666, what songs are going to be in that one? And I was like, oh, there's nothing really like like automatically linked to it apart from it being like ye olde times. And so I've just felt like a bit, I felt more at home in the first two. Like I knew what was coming kind of, and the third one I really didn't know what was coming. And I also was like pleasantly surprised. I was like, oh, this is actually different to what I thought, and it's actually really well linked to the other two stories. It did actually really tie it in, and we weren't there for a huge amount of time, which was also very clever, I think. But I also didn't know what to expect. I was like, is this just going to be The Witch?
Exactly. I was thinking of The Witch. And apart from the last 10 minutes, I found The Witch, like, completely traumatic. Like, you know, it feels like a real feel-bad film until the end. And I sat through The Witch at the cinema, and I went with my brother. And I was like, you don't really want to see The Witch with your brother because you've got that slightly weird incesty vibe going on. And my brother's like 3 years younger than me. And I was like, oh, I don't want to watch this with our Chris. But I was like, oh, I don't like it. And I came out just like, oh, I feel all sad and depressed now. And I thought we were going to, because, you know, they're set just like 30 years apart, the Fear Street and The Witch. So I thought I was going to get more of that, which is why I was less excited.
I'm kind of with you both on that, and that I kind of expected The Witch vibe, and I didn't actually expect the majority of the film to really be set in the 90s again, which was a really pleasant surprise. So generally speaking, with those expectations going in and with that kind of slight hesitancy, what did you make of it? Zora, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I'm going to get out of the way. The accents were terrible.
Oh my God, they were so bad. I was like,
terrible.
Is that Irish? I'm not sure. It was Irish
for
a
Jamaican
bit.
a couple of times. Because Irish and Jamaican have the same sound changes. So unless you really know what you're doing, it just sometimes, a couple of lines I was like, we're in Jamaica, we're in Kingston. But like aside from that, I get why they use the same actors. I feel like they could have been American, if I'm completely honest. I feel like it wouldn't have been entirely weird to like have it maybe slip to like a more mid-Atlantic American or something, or a more like something. But I was like, I don't think it necessarily needs to be Irish. But anyway.
Well, it wasn't anyway, so.
Yeah. I was like, oh, okay, this is happening. Okay, everyone's doing it. All right. But apart from that, I actually quite liked how they used the same actors, which kind of it brought you back to the idea of, oh, this is generations and generations of these people this has been affecting, which I think is kind of the point. I'm not sure that everyone was necessarily related to all the people they were playing, but it kind of brought back to the idea that Shadyside and Sunnyvale have been like, it's been forever. It's been for a really long time that people have just been growing up with these things, and this is the beginning of it, and connected all these characters to that same place. But yeah, I generally liked it. I like the way they set it up at the town. It was like very Crucible.
Extremely Crucible, yeah.
Like, you know, just everyone's trying to go about their business, and then someone sees something they shouldn't, and then everyone flips out. Like, I also love, actually, my favourite thing about it was the idea that teenagers are still teenagers. In 1666. So teenagers are still like, let's sneak off to the woods and get drunk and make out. Because I 100% believe that's what they would have been doing. This idea that teenagers of a different time were just like incredibly different people and didn't have like hormones or whatever is, I hate that when they erase that from like, it's like they were the same. They were just like in old times. And like we know that through history, like there's like all the things about like Roman graffiti is still like a penis. It's like someone scrolling like cock, or like you know,
Yep.
you know,
yeah,
like
and the
Julius
ancients
is gay, like.
Like yeah, like the ancient Egyptians would just be scribbling like tits in hieroglyphics.
Exactly. So I'm just like, everyone's been the same forever. So yes, of course, teenagers would find a way to go and cut loose at some point, and they want to hump and make out with each other as well. That's exactly what would be happening. So that was my favorite thing about it. That's how it was. They weren't going to do like witchcraft. They were going to like have a good time. Which would be frowned upon, and especially then, but like I'm like, but yeah, that's what they would be doing. So yeah, I love that about it. So I love that it was like just like they kept the heart of like teenagers through the whole thing. They really made them the focus, and I really like that.
I think for me, it was also seeing the actors from the previous films, which I do think is smart. And because like the jump between 90s and 70s is like essentially nothing, but the jump from 70s to the 1666 is massive. And so keeping them on, I was like, oh, look, there's Ziggy. Oh, there we go. And it feels nice having the familiar faces. And it is that sense of like, it's all just a little bit of history repeating, isn't it? So I was pleased by that. And something that Anna and I talked about last time was how the three films really repeat, it works to have repeat viewings of them. You get more and more out of them. And at some point, I don't think I can watch them all again immediately because I've been doing quite a lot of Fear Street stuff recently. But I think in like a month or two's break, I'd like to go back and watch all three of them again. And I think just that sense of how well they're actually all connected up, which you don't get, I think, fully on the first time round because there's actually quite a lot of complex plot going on. I think you can miss it. So there was something really nice about getting the actors in on the early one and just saying, oh, right, okay, this is just repeating and repeating and repeating. And I found that very pleasing.
Yeah, it's interesting. You both brought up kind of the liking the actors playing themselves. I think that was a little bit of a surprise for me. Like I didn't expect it, but it makes so much thematic sense and kind of connects the character of Dina so much more with the character of Sarah Freer. And one thing I think really worked well for me is because in the first and you know it's the bookend of the second one, the relationship and the love story between Dina and Sam is kind of the big motivation and the heart of the story. I love that it's kind of transplanted into the 1600s, and we see them basically doing the same thing except with the pixies. Without the pixies, they still kind of want to sneak off and make out in the woods. So, what do you make of their love story, and in particular, kind of that being the center of Sarah Freer's story as well?
I had some thoughts about this. I was watching the first time I was watching 1666, and it got to the end where, the end of the 1666 bit, where, as we know, Sarah gets hoisted up on a tree and killed, and I was like, like. I was feeling really conflicted because I feel like the Fear Street series is really contemporary, it's really forward-facing, and it felt awfully like Bury Your Gays. Like, they'd made all these links between, like, queerness and witchcraft in terms of, you know, you could see them as parallels for each other, you know, and Sarah's dad going, there's always been a strangeness within you, and you go, oh, I'm supposed to read, does that mean witchcraft or queer? And then when she was killed, I was like, oh... Like, I get that it's horror and, you know, people die. But I was like, I feel like every iteration is like watching queer girls getting killed. But to bring it back, I feel by the end of the film, they were like, we knew about the Bury Your Gays trope. We knew that you don't do that anymore. And we're going to finish with gigantic, with kissing, and everything's wonderful. So I don't know. I think tonally it just felt so grim when Sarah Freer died that I was like, don't make the gay girl die. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's horror, so they're gonna, and Sarah Freer is always gonna die, but I felt I was a bit tired of like queer girls really getting it until the end, and then it was lovely.
I think I get what you're saying, actually, yeah. But I think I really like that it tied Sarah Freer to, like you said, Anna, to Dina. That they have a lot more in common, actually, than we first anticipated, and maybe that's why they're the ones who have like kind of been chosen, because it's a story that they recognize. And I love actually that it wasn't even, because I feel like in another witch setting, in a film that was just set in this time, like The Crucible or something, if they found out someone was gay, they probably would call them a witch and all that stuff. But I kind of like that they subverted that even a little bit by not making that even the real sole reason. They were just kind of scapegoated to cover something else. Yes. It was just convenient. It wasn't even like, oh my god, they're gay, quick, let's hang her. It was literally like, oh shit, this is really convenient because now I can cover up all the evil shit I'm doing. So I kind of like that. I kind of like that it wasn't even that. It wasn't even just like they were all horrified. It was just like, oh no. And it was also that it was Sarah protecting, her girlfriend.
That was sweet.
I like that it was that too. It wasn't just she was caught, dragged out, they were both hanged. It was like, no, she chose to protect her. So they were like, I feel like in every way that it could be, they subverted it, but still made it the story that we know. I would like to publicly apologise for calling Sarah Fear a grouchy porch witch in the first installment of these. I was like, well, the town, I mean, I don't agree with hanging her, but they were right that she was a witch. No.
that was actually really funny recording that with you, Zora, because we did that one via Zoom so we could see each other's faces. And I remember telling you at that time I was working so hard to keep a poker face because I'd seen all 3 films at that point and you'd only seen the first one. I was like, don't betray anything.
Don't make a face. I was just like, well, she was a witch. She was a really good one. She's cursed the town for like flipping years. She's great. And
I was like, you're gonna have to apologize to Sarah afterwards.
She's like, such a bones. Like, it's fine. And now I'm just like, oh, sorry, Sarah, my mistake. Of course, it was just that you were like a woman in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's all it was.
But I do love what you highlight there, which is like there is a moment of choice. It's limited choice, of course, but there is a moment where she sort of sees the situation and kind of sees, a bad door and a worse door. And she's like, what, I can scapegoat myself. I can lean into this and sacrifice myself. And I know that the woman I love will be protected if I do that. So, but if I don't, I will still get killed, and then my girlfriend will probably get killed as well.
Yeah.
So there is like a little bit of sort of that taking back of power that I really liked in that situation. I mean, it sucked, and she was, wrongfully accused and scapegoated to cover up for. We will talk about Nick Good later on, but don't even want to say his name. But I love the kind of that aspect of it. And then the parallels with Ziggy's story as well, and how she was chased and sort of hung up on this tree and kind of tortured and looked at by the same actors as well. The same actors from 94 and 78. It really kind of, I think, drilled down that cyclical nature of trauma.
Yeah. But what did we think, though, then, about the fact that Sarah Fear is innocent and not even actually a witch? Like, what did you two make of that?
Well, I love that you just read out my question.
I totally did. I was just bringing it on. I was moving it forward.
No, but that's a good point, actually, Alison. I wanted next to talk about the twist and the reveal of Sarah. Well, the first of the two, the fact that Sarah is not actually a practicing witch. She becomes a witch by being burned and tortured as one.
I really like so this is my issue with The Witch, that film, was that I was like, oh, then she is a witch. And I was like, because they were so true to, like, they kept all the, it was from diary entries, right? A lot of the dialogue from that film. So I was like, you kept true to it. And the truth was, they were just murdering a lot of women who weren't doing anything. So to make her a witch, I was a bit like, well, She wasn't. Like, they weren't. And it would have been great because then they wouldn't have to be persecuted. If you were, like, an actual witch, why would you sit around and be like, I don't know. But so I kind of liked that she wasn't. And, like, all the things that become legend, like her cutting off her own hand, which obviously she didn't. It just actually gets, like, quite brutally, like, torn off and stuff. Like, I actually like that they kept it like that there was nothing actually magical or I don't know about her, because I'm like, this is actually what was happening.
Yes.
I mean, there wasn't a guy like also doing like summonses of like whatever, but
what
was actually happening is that someone just decided, and then just the whole town like would turn so quickly. Like everyone who knew them would just, there was no way to prove you weren't. You just could insist, and that was it. And that if people believed it, then that's it for you. Like, you're screwed.
Yeah,
there's like no real way out of it. So I actually really liked that they did that, and that actually because of her persecution, because of what happened to her, because it was so brutal and so bad and so heinous, that's what kept her like spirit or whatever alive, and that's what was able to make her still connected to that earth and that place, and to connect to the people in the 90s. I love that was that way round. It's like, if you had done something so heinous, that, you know, he might have got away with it. Do you know what I mean? Like, if he hadn't persecuted her in the run up to it, or in a way to cover it, he might have actually, like, you know, no one maybe would have known ever. So I kind of like that he kind of makes her magic, or makes her like spiritual or whatever, because of that. She gets to like survive in some way through time. Unfortunately, the women back then don't get to that. But like, do you know what I mean? I really hate when they make it like, oh, she was a witch. I'm like, but they weren't witches.
Yeah.
they were women. They were
people.
Yes.
Yeah. So I actually kind of love that about it.
It really reminded me of this film, I don't know if you both have seen it, called The Autopsy of Jane Doe.
Yes.
No, I've not seen it.
Oh, okay. Well, I won't spoil it. But,
oh, no, sorry.
Okay. Moving on.
Oh, God.
There's no way to talk about it without, like...
You can spoil it. I'll live. There's always 10 million horror films I'm supposed to be watching.
Are you sure, Alison?
Yeah, go for it.
So in that film, there's an autopsy of a young woman, a creepy corpse who kind of remains quite well preserved despite, you know, having just been found. And it transpires that a lot of spooky stuff, witchy stuff starts happening. The coroners think that she's a witch. What they find out is that she was tortured as a witch, but wasn't actually one, just a woman, like we've been talking about. But because of the sheer amount of pain and suffering that she went through, they essentially conjured up her powers. Yeah. So she became a witch because she was tried as one, because of that injustice and that rage and stuff that kept on, and that magic and that power manifested after her physical death. And I kind of love that as well about Sarah Fierce, that she only becomes a witch basically in response to being scapegoated by Nick's good magic, his actual satanic kind of conjurings.
I just think you two have got like a more subtle and nuanced expectation of horror than me, because I feel like everything you're saying is right, and it has like much more like resonance and depth when you say it like that. But I was like, you know, when Sarah says to Hannah, let's just go get the book from the woods, let's summon up the devil and make a deal. Yeah. And Hannah's like, I'm not sure about that. And then they don't. And I was like, go get the book! Go get the book! Like everything you're saying makes complete sense and has that deep resonance. But for me, I was like, bring the devil, destroy all these people. Like, I like my action. I wanted to see Sarah go full demonic and just destroy everyone. And I was like, she's not a witch. After all that, and she's not a witch. So even though everything you said is deep, I was a bit sad there was no devil.
I love it.
You wanted the full, what's the new Sabrina call? What's the new Sabrina called? You wanted that where she's like, I'm actually the queen of hell, actually?
Yes.
That's the version I was hoping for. It has to be said.
And what did you make then, Alison? Let's start with you, because you were so disappointed by Sarah Fear not being a witch. Did you enjoy the fact that it was Nick Good actually who was the devil worshipping witch?
Well, I was just slightly blindsided by it. I was like, oh, it's him. Like, I was like, oh, right, fine. Okay, then. I was a bit surprised. It was like when we talked about 78 and you were like, so what do you think to Nick Good? And at that point, I'd seen 1666 and I was like, oh, he's an asshole is what I wanted to say. But I felt we'd to level that out in case of spoilers. So the fact that he essentially is the devil incarnate, it was fine. He just, I don't know. He just, I feel like I could take him out. Do you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't like, he doesn't scare me. Like, I could totally have him in a fight. And so even though like he's got all these occult powers, I just feel like I'd smack him and it'd be like over.
Oh my God. I am surprised and not opposed to this color on you, Alison.
I vote for Alison to do like an alternate version of this particular film where like Sarah becomes Queen of Hell and Alison just gives him a quick smack.
Yeah, I could have
it's
him.
over. Yeah, and then they just live happily ever after.
I love it. I'm here for it. Please fund it. Fear Street remix, Fear Street 1666 remix, where what's his name? Ashley Zuckerman, the actor who plays Nick Good, just gets smacked for like 90 minutes straight.
Like, shut up and just smack him around the face a few times.
I do know what you mean about him. He's like, you know, sometimes in films where there's been a character who's been playing the good character all the whole time and they switch to like, you find out they're bad. Like a really good example is in Get Out with the girlfriend, right?
Yes.
Like, not that she was good before, but that switch is actually really terrifying. You're like, oh, you are unhinged. And I feel like we never quite get that with Nick Good, where it's like, oh, actually, you're quite scary. There's not like that turn when we know that makes him like a real threat. I know what you mean. It's like, he's when Dean is chasing him, I won't like reveal the end, but when Dean is chasing him at the end, he's really running like a little bit. He is actually like terrified and properly like, let me get away. He's not there like, let's start this fight. He's like, Dina, no.
Yeah.
So I get what you mean.
I think that in our last conversation, Alison, we both agreed that Nick was an asshole because of how he treated Ziggy. But in this one, the reveal in the olden times that he's behind it is such an incel move. It's like, oh, I deserve better and I'm not getting better, so I'm gonna summon the powers of hell.
Totally. I want my power. I want my legacy to leave. We'll just work harder, you know.
But also, I'm sorry, but it's so fucking lame. He summoned the devil, and it wasn't like, I'm gonna fucking run this town. He's like, oh no, one day my great ancestor will be like a cop, and the other one will be like a mayor of this one small town. Like, I'll just make one side of the town really nice. Like, what a shit thing. If you summon the devil, like,
exactly.
You're not the richest man in the world. You're not like fucking flying on jets and like having sex with supermodels. You're like, no, I just really hope that my great grandson is a cop one day. Like,
and I get some good crops.
Yeah, absolute nonsense. Like, oh, I just hope that, you know, people who live on my side of town have really nice houses. Like, just an absolute waste of devil summoning, if you ask me. Like, what? Like, dream big there, like, you know, Nick Good. Like, I just absolutely awful. So yeah, I was just disappointed with his choice.
I love that there's now another a prequel, perhaps a spin-off of the Fear Street trilogy that's come out of this conversation, where one of Nick Good's perhaps like ancestors decides to go wild and dream big. It's like, actually, I want to be Elon Musk,
right?
As opposed to having a 9 to 5.
But even that, Elon Musk, if that's your biggest, if that's you, I mean, truly, I'd be beloved by everybody. I'd be loaded. I don't know. It'd be insane. I just feel like if you're going to go through the effort of like putting on a cloak and lighting some candles, like killing a goat, like changing the earth, like actual, like building tunnels with your like magic and mind or whatever to get the devil there and to pass it on from generation. I'd be like, shit, we're gonna make this shit insane. We're gonna run everything. There'll be world peace, but because I'm in charge of everything. Like it won't be like, oh yeah, no, I'm just gonna sit to my corner. I'm never gonna travel. Just every single one of my like family members are gonna like live here and do something kind of minorly okay in this town. It's just such a shit dream, and it's so disappointing.
He's no good. He's no good. He has such a small town mentality. Like he really needs to get going, doesn't he?
Yeah,
he's a small town boy.
Really,
but
that's why boys shouldn't be witches. That's why. This is exactly why.
Well,
wasting their time.
And kind of I wanted to pick up on the witchy aspect, because Alison, there's something you brought up at the beginning of like the sort of old-timey witches, the 17th century style witchcraft movies, which I think got a lot more play in the 70s with the whole kind of rise of folk horror, especially British folk horror films, versus the 90s witch craze. And how do you, and this is for both of you really, how do you think this film kind of combines both of those sensibilities?
I was thinking about this, and I think it's doing something interesting that I didn't entirely expect. So, like, being a good researcher, I was doing my prep for coming on today, and I was looking at how the witches have been represented in horror films over the decades. And, like, 1930s to 1950s, there's really not many witches going on at all. They only really start picking up in the 60s, but they tend to be in, like, covens, and it's not until you get to the 90s that you have, like, a single woman witch who's a big central figure of horror. So, in that sense, they're kind of speaking to that, I think, really. But then the fact that she's not a witch and that she's actually like a poor young woman who is being put upon for essentially not knowing her place, not conforming to the sexuality of the period and being a bit gobby, like that's not it. It's like pre-horror. Like, the horror was at least doing the witches as monsters, but this is going back to just the kind of stuff Izora was talking about, of just it being shit being a woman. So it's kind of, it's picking up elements, I would say, of the differing representations of witches in horror, but it's going in on the big central, like, real life patriarchy stuff, I think. And, that is really actually more terrifying than anything else.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was like, what's actually scary about that time is the fact that at any point someone could just decide something huge about your life and you would have no say in it. It's like terrifying. You could just be doing completely normal things and then someone just decides to accuse you of something and you're like screwed. And I think it ties in like what you're talking about, the coven and stuff.
Yeah.
About like that feels for me like when I think of witch films, my mind actually firstly goes to like The Craft, like lots of
always
teen
correct.
witch things.
Yes.
Yeah. So I quite like that they like obviously none of them are witches, but they tie it in with just the teens being in the woods and that they have this little thing they say to each other, which feels very much like that, which is often missing from films that are based in that time or of that genre. Of that connection of just actual people. I feel like when stuff's set in that time, usually there's very little connection of people even. Like everyone's just in the town and it's like, yes, there's the reverend, there's the baker, but it doesn't seem like there's really any like huge amounts of interpersonal relationships, even friendships. So it was nice to see that. Because I'm like, oh, this feels like something else. This feels like its own thing. And there's that guy that comes on to, is it Hannah? And Sarah like stops him. And even that thing of like, she would really be at threat of that. And that, Sarah was protecting her all the time anyway. Like, I don't know, from every threat, which is like just men in general and like then the town. And so I kind of like that it had that element, which I feel like is not really there in a lot of those stories. Yeah. Like them as people, actually. Yes. With like inner lives and thoughts that aren't just like, oh, I gotta wake up in old-timey times and do old-timey things. Like, they don't tend to have, like...
Go tend to the field.
Yeah. They're never thinking about anything else about the next thing they have to do. It's like, they're people. I think that's often missing. So I really like that about it. I think it married those ideas really well.
And it kind of sets up the whole thing across the trilogy, doesn't it? About teen life and teen thoughts and teen relationships and all that stuff about how, like, well, to me, like, all the worst moments in the films come from people being horrible to each other. It's not from the monsters or from anything occult. All of it is about, like, how bloody hard it is being a teenager. And then how all the very worst things that happen because of other people, not because of curses.
And on that note, actually, what did you make of this feels like, I think I'd argue kind of the most brutal of the Fear Street films. What did you make of the actual kind of violence and gore of it?
I was really distressed by the church scene with the children. So this is what I hinted at on the 78 when I said there's been a couple of times in the Fear Street films when I've gone, oh wow, that's nasty. So the poor young boy who was guarding for Shadyside in 78, who gets it, I was like, oh no, he's really sweet. Don't kill him. He's got glasses and he's really nice. And then when they went into the church, and I was like, is that somebody's face on the floor? Is that eyeballs on the floor? And I was like, oh, it's okay. The pastor's gone mad and blinded himself. Oh no, like the pastor's killed all of the children. And I was like, don't kill all the children. So I was quite shocked at them really going in on that. I was really surprised. I was, I don't get that unsettled. I mean, I don't watch really nasty horror. Me and Anna have talked about this before. I'm not here for really nasty horror, but
I'm here for it.
I know you're here for it. Like, be destroyed by it. I'm not. But I was quite surprised at how much it unsettled me in places. I really was.
I quite liked, when me and Anna talked about these films, I was just like, I want more killers. That was like my biggest gripe. I was like, I want to see all the murderers, I want to see what they did, I want to see what happened, I want their backstory. So I was like, yeah, there's a preachy, start it all. So I was just like collecting them like Pokemon, just counting, ticking them off my little list. I was like, oh, there's that one, that's exciting. So I was actually like, it was really gruesome. I was more gruesome than, but the deaths in the first one were quite gruesome. So I was kind of like, this is actually on par. And like you said, in 78, when the kids, it was always like the kids, you're like, they're surely not going to kill these small children. And then it was like, oh no. They murdered all of them. They let it happen.
All the children are gone.
Yeah. So I was like, well, they're not going to hold back for this. And so seeing that scene, it was the parents coming in, it being like them slowly realizing, as we realize, like, oh my God, all their eyes are gone. But I was just quite excited to see all the killers. Like, the killers are quite exciting for me.
I know what you mean.
I was just like, oh, this is... And it was also because earlier on, he was like this quite nice figure, right? So especially... It was like, especially... I'm glad we got to see a bit of the preacher before he turned, because he, like, he's joking, the kids like sing that song about him and he jokes with them, and it's a joke about eyes, and it makes you like, oh, is that how it connects? They just pick one random thing, like when they put their name on the stone, is it just one random thing from their life that they go, well, that's how we're going to connect you to, like, the murders you do, because he sings a song with the kids that's about like their eyes or being blind or something.
So I actually have some info on this that came up in my interview with Lee Jania, because she mentioned like this, they have backstories for all the killers that are not included in the film, but the way that she spoke about it was that the Seraphir kind of curse, well, the Nick Good curse really would sort of exaggerate the worst parts of that person, or sort of like tap into these things from their lives that then would get kind of twisted and perverted into violence. So she didn't talk about the preacher, but she did talk about the milkman as like being kind of being a war vet who had been scarred in the war, and then when he went after women, he went after the women who he, despite not being like a violent person, thought that were looking at him weird.
Oh, God.
So the nastiness kind of came from perhaps like a a very human sense of insecurity or self-consciousness, but then with the curse and with the magic just got blown up into serial killing.
Which was, I have so many more questions about the kid one then. I'm like, what was he doing?
Yeah.
What was happening in that kid's head that he was like, I'm putting a mask and kill people with baseball bats? But
maybe he lost at a Rounders game, and then that just
that one bad Rounders game. Everyone will pay now. But like, I really liked I especially like the we haven't got there yet, but when we go back to the 90s, the all those scenes, and obviously I did like it because all the killers were there, but like I like murderers, it's great.
You had your serial killer bingo ready.
I was like, this is fantastic. I quite like that they didn't hold back, because what I was saying to Anna about 94 when we talked about that was when we see the death of I've forgotten the poor girl's name. Kate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the bread slicer.
It the bread machine? Yeah.
I really thought it just looked like one of those fights where she'd like yank up at the end and like when and it didn't happen. And then it was like, there's sliced head. And so I was like, oh my God, what? And so it just I kind of like they didn't mollycoddle, even though like it's teens. It's like, this is really actually brutal. They are going to die really scary, horrible, violent deaths if they don't figure out a way out of this. There's no part of this that's going to be like, oh, maybe it isn't so bad. It's going to be really horrendous. So I kind of like they didn't hold back from it. That it was like genuinely like the how scared they were. It's like, it's not just you're going to die. You're going to die some really horrible way.
I think that really I think amplified the sense of danger for me, because I think that's one of the things from the 90s films, that the sense of danger was not as intense. It's usually they're usually quite grounded. It's fun, it's not nasty killings. Not to dismiss the depth and the psychology of 90s slashers. I love them, but there is an element here of like, oh no, you were going to get brutally murdered and disemboweled if you don't run fast enough, if you don't outsmart these supernatural, pretty much unkillable killers.
Yeah, completely. You've got that. It's exactly what you're saying about the kind of 90s and 2000s slashers where essentially if you just go home from university, you'll probably be fine. But like here, it's not going to happen. And like that bread slicing moment, it's just like when Cindy gets stabbed at the end of the episode of 78, and you're like, oh, she's not coming back from that.
Nope.
And like you put the head goes through the bread slice, you're like, they're not coming back from that, are they? It's not.
Like when Sarah's hand gets chopped off, it's like, that is not getting reattached. That is not. You can't bandage that up.
There's no get out clauses here that are going to work. There's a splendid pleasure in the violence and the display of the kills in these films, which apart from when it's put children, I'm definitely into as well.
And I think now this feels like you've brought us back into the 90s already, Zora, but like let's stick in the 90s. What did you make of that part of the film, which is both connected and with so much more new information, but as we've mentioned at the start, neither of us were really expecting to go back to the 90s where we started the Fear Street trilogy.
I was really surprised that I got 40 minutes of the 90s at the end, but I was very, very happy about it. So as I said, I'd gone into 1666 going, oh God, is this just going to be the horror of the patriarchy? Like, I don't know if I want to sit through this. And then it went back to the 90s, and not only did it go back to the 90s, it went back to the mall, which, the mall is like one of my favourite places in horror films. And then I felt like it recognised, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, that this isn't just the end of one film. This is the end of a huge story. Yes. And I think they really went for it in terms of the kills. and the humour of it. So we had all the killers, and all the killers are killing each other, and there's blood everywhere, and she's covering herself in CK1, and it's very 90s, and there's neon, and there's a pizzeria and a mall. And it went for it. Like, it could have been too much, but I think it was like the right level of excess. And then such a pleasure to go back to the 90s and it just be filled with all of my favourite horror things. So I was absolutely delighted when it happened, quite frankly.
And it felt like when you went back to the 90s, finally it felt like they had the upper hand. It really felt impossible that they could... It just felt like an impossible situation, I think, in the first two films. And then once they've seen what actually happened to Sarah and stuff, you feel like for the first time, you're like, oh, they have a chance here. They have the upper hand now. They can figure this out, even if stuff goes slightly wrong or whatever, they can actually figure out. And I know in your interview it came up about like Home Alone was one of the films that they made them watch, which definitely it feels like very like violent Home Alone.
Oh yeah,
that's perfect.
Where they rig like the shop like grates and all this stuff to like trap the killers, and it becomes like a serial killer like zoo for like a moment, which I also really enjoyed. I was like, this would be a great attraction. Just keep them in there. But yeah, and it becomes really good. And what is funny about it is because obviously all the killers turn up and they're all fighting each other. It's a really good idea. They're all fighting each other. It's all great.
Yes.
And when Nick Good turns up, it's so good. Nick Good turns up. I wish there was more kind of a reckoning with him and Ziggy, because I think Ziggy deserved, I don't know, a bit more of a reckoning with him. But then also I wish it was scary when he turned up. It really wasn't. You're like, oh, you're fucked now. The kid, like, if you're all they have to deal with, you're absolutely fucked, like, at this point. What was actually scary was Sam getting loose. Like, you just see her like run. I was like, oh my god, Sam's loose. No one's watching Sam.
He's like, I've been chained to a radiator for 6 hours of this film. I'm going to come out.
You just see her like scuttling away. I was like, oh my god. And I wish that like he was actually more of a scary presence. But I did love going back to the 90s. I did love them like figuring out what they need to do and kind of just everything for all those women through time, for like Ziggy, for her sister, for Sarah, for Hannah. They've just like brought it all back to and like figured it all out, and I really, really love that. That it felt like I don't know, like some sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Not relief, but like I don't know.
Satisfying.
Yeah, resolution for all these people, all these women. Yes, all the shady siders, but especially these like key women through time. The nurse it was her daughter that got turned. Like it was just felt really nice for that to happen. And
it was lovely, wasn't it? It was really sweet.
It was lovely that the women got to like murder Nick and
so nice.
It was so nice. It really brought them all together, and I just love that it was a teen girls as well. Like I love that it was them in the end that really figured everything out. It was Ziggy, it was the teens. It was like I loved it.
It really felt like that another great 90s witch film that I love with all my heart, Practical Magic. At the end of that, when they get rid of another weak-willed man, they do it kind of by sort of channeling all their ancestors and all the women who were wronged, or in the case of Practical Magic, cursed. And I mean, it's very corny, not like in this film, but it kind of reminded me of that, of what you're talking about, kind of that resolution across generations as well.
And just kind of the idea that I kind of like anything that involves witchcraft, which just involves the idea of like, well, women are just inherently have magic in them because they're women, and it's not necessarily like, oh, I'm doing spells all the time. It's just like, no, when you're around other women you can do things, which is kind of present in Witches of Eastwick, in the end of Practical Magic. Like, it's just all the women from the phone tree who come, but because they're all there, it's still like magic. And I love that it's just because of Dean's determination to save Sam, which it seems also like no one's tried to do for anybody else, which I love that their bond is that strong that she's not just like, oh crap, Sam's one of them now, that's it. She's like, no, there must be a way to figure this out.
Yeah.
Which for all the other shady siders who get like possessed, everyone's just been like, oh, they're gone crazy. Oh, I don't know what happened. And like no one's really ever questioned it. The nurse, the mum of the girl, obviously figured out that something was up. She knew the next killer was going to be, she attempted to kill him in 78, right? But she didn't figure out the details of it. But I love that it was that made, that even got them to this point, was just Dina being absolutely adamant that they save Sam. From the beginning, when Sam's the target, when they're clearly just after Sam to kill her, or the killers, she's like, no, like there must be a way to figure this out. And then when Sam turns, even after Sam stabs her, she's like, no, we can still work this out, guys. Give me a second, let me think this through. And I love that it's just like pure determination. Like, and Ziggy's answer was just, understandably, was just to hide away for her entire life and be like constantly in fear that, you know, she was gonna, at some point, something was gonna come after her. So even freeing her from that, like, I love that it freed these women up in some ways. And even afterwards, it frees Dina and Sam up, that they're more openly together. They're, I don't know. And it obviously frees Shady Side. A big fan of it all.
I mean, there's something so poignant about what you said, and it kind of, I was thinking as well about us just dunking on Nick Good as a villain, of the fact that he's like not scary enough, and I think that's really deliberate, and I think it's so, it makes Dina so much more compelling and active of a character as well, where she's like, no, we're fixing this. This is not happening, not on my watch. And I think that's so, I mean, forgive me if I'm getting like overthinking this, but it's this element as well of shady siders have always just been told, and by everyone around them, that they're shit, that they won't amount to anything. So everything that they're fighting for is through sheer grit and willpower, whereas Nick Good has just been handed these demonic powers and has done fuck all with them. Has not really earned them. It's just kind of, it's been hereditary. And even in those moments, and we spoke about this, Alison, of him like being able to, having the choice to protect Ziggy when she was at her most vulnerable, he's like, nah, I don't even have the balls to do that when everything is so easy. So I think he's kind of scary, but not scary, because he's just a weak man. There's not really that much personality to him at all. And I think that's what makes him scariest, because he's just going to try to defend, sort of defend the thing that he's been used to, that he's been told is his birthright, but that he doesn't fully understand, or possibly doesn't even want to understand the extent of the power that he has access to. He's menacing, I think, for what he represents, but not in himself.
Exactly. Like, as like a British person, I can't help join the kind of class analogies here. And the idea of like a young white man who's just been born into the privilege. And like, that's essentially like what he's embodying, which is, you know, it's always like that. And we do it like that. And, you know, things work out quite well for us as a rule. You know, and you're like, this is just what I feel like my professional life is like. You know what I mean? So it's that sense of him standing in for something rather than him needing to be like the monster per se. Like the monster is the society around them, isn't it?
That's really true, actually. Yeah, like there's nothing scarier than like pathetic man who just like seizes on opportunities to like get ahead no matter who it like screws over, which I mean could be our entire government right now. We could talk about so it is that thing of like there's nothing special about you, but for some reason you're in the position of power.
You are born into it.
And you don't even know what to do with it, and you're just like, I don't know, wandering around like an idiot. Like, I actually do, like, the bit where Dina's chasing him through the tunnels, she's literally like, Nick! So she becomes, like, the thing that's stalking him. And he really doesn't know what to do the minute his secret's discovered. He doesn't really have a plan for that. And that's also the thing that like which fits in with that analogy, in the sense of if anyone uncovers something or points out a really obvious like, but this is what's happening, this is what you're doing, this is how you got here, they're just like, no. Like he has no plan for if it's just taken away from him. And the fact that he basically, again, I really can't get past the fact that essentially they're using like summoning of devil and like devil worship to lead a pretty normal life. Nick Good doesn't even have a girlfriend. Like, he's just to live a pretty normal. I don't think even it's not like he was handed the role of like sheriff or whatever. Like out of school, he worked up the ranks to sheriff. He just did normal things.
He's so rubbish.
Honestly, he's a flop of a witch. He's a flop of a demon worshipper. And
I'm just like, you don't even like, I don't know, and Ziggy didn't know this whole time. You're not even dating Ziggy, this girl you've liked this whole time. You just like, just being sheriff on your own. Just arresting like graffiti. I don't know, just so lame. And it's just, so it's that thing of like, you don't even really know what to do with this power. You're just like, you've just used it to live like what you consider a good life, like which is just incredibly boring. You just use it to continue to be boring. And it's just, and also wanting to think of himself as a good guy. Like, because he doesn't have to be considered that nothing would happen to him if he ran around being a dick, but he makes a point of like being to the kid like, I'm on your side. It's like, you still want everyone to think you're a nice man as well. Like
why do you
so
care?
Pathetic. Yeah, exactly. It's just so like, oh, please like me, don't ask about my like devil activities. Like, it's just you're right, that there's nothing scarier than that, just someone desperately, pathetically trying to cling on to power to do not very much of it with it, just as long as no one else has it.
There's nothing scarier than more menacing, really, in fiction and in real life, than a confident, mediocre man
my God.
too much power and too little imagination.
It's like everything is over saying, I'm just like, yep, that's that politician, that's that politician, that's that politician. This is like the entire British like constitution. This is how it all works.
And so it's like nail on head. She's absolutely nailed it. Like with making him the big mastermind, because it's not even really a mastermind. It's just like some guy.
He's a henchman. He's just a henchman.
Yeah, he's just some dude. And even like I said, right? So if this was me, if I was like, you know, summoning the devil and living my life on my mountaintop in my big house, because that's what I'd be doing with it. And I was like, oh, these kids are on the verge of like ruining my entire shit. Like, absolutely not. The first case, he summons 3 killers. I'd be like, listen, the whole roster's coming up. The entire roster, every generation of murderer is coming for you. There is no way they would have escaped that. But he's like, oh, 3. I'm like, think bigger. What are you doing? Even at the end, it's not even everyone then. I'm like, I'd have everybody up. Everyone would be working. I have the undead, like, unstoppable murderers I could just summon at will. And you're like, maybe 6? Maybe.
I don't know. Is that too much?
Like, actually, that one guy's on holiday. Like, what the fuck? Like, call everybody. Carnage. I want carnage. Like, it's just, why not just destroy Shadyside? Why keep them there? It's just baffling. The whole thing is really confusing. He's like going to visuals and talking at football games. Like, this is the life you're I can't stand it. But like,
I just want to give props to the actor who plays the good Ashley Zuckerman, because you know what? It takes balls to play such a spineless little dweeb.
Oh, yes.
He is. What a dweeb. Just, and he made his brother mayor. It's like, even you gave your brother like a better job than you. Like, what are you doing? Why do you even have a job? This is my issue with, like, every time we talk about supernatural beings and stuff, I'm like, why would you give yourself a job? Why would you be working? Like, vampires, why are you working? Twilight kids, why are you going to school? You twat, like, what are you doing? Like, just be at home, have a great time. I don't know. So the fact that he gave himself and his brother, like, jobs even, it's, like, hilarious.
Can we also add, like, jobs in the public service?
Yes. Yes, he's not even a banker.
It's not even like a fun, like, I'm just a really good guitarist. I'm in this really cool fucking band. He's like, I'm a policeman. I'm very high up in my very specific town. Nowhere else. Like, what are you talking about?
And we've mentioned it a bit, but what did you guys make of the supernatural elements? Because we get a lot more of that in this film, like the cave, all the summoning, the practicalities, and through generations of the deal with the devil that they do and how that manifests and how it ends. What did you make of all of that?
I thought they did quite well on it, because they're combining different genres, aren't they? So you've got your classic slasher, which tends to start with, at least, not to be supernatural, but they're kind of combining that then with the supernatural slasher, and I never really felt like it jarred. Like, it could have jarred, I think, quite badly, because they are sort of two different things, but I liked it. I liked going with it. I'm always there for supernatural. This is what I mean about really wanting Sarah Fear to actually be a witch. Anytime that someone hints at the supernatural, if it turns out not to be, I'm like, oh, well, that's disappointing. So I was really glad that we got, like, full supernatural, loads of resurrection, killers on killers on killers, killers killing each other, and then they come back again and again, and it's never going to stop, and blood everywhere. Like, I was very happy with all of that, and the supernatural stuff, and the killing. You don't get as many supernatural slashers these days. I think, if it's full supernatural, it tends to be a bit more, like, ghostly and, like, longing in the past, doesn't it? But, this was, like, full blood and supernatural. So I found it very pleasing.
Yeah, and I think it actually makes sense, because the slashers we're thinking of, the killers are kind of unkillable anyway, but for just no reason.
Yeah, just for franchises.
Yeah,
franchise reasons.
It's a trope of the genre, and you just kind of go with it, where there's there's a reason for it.
Yeah, so I'm just like, it kind of makes sense that they would be, because we just don't get a reason the rest of the time. So it kind of works that there's something that's always coming for you, and you can't really kill it, and it's a more obvious way. And I'm actually really curious, because I think one of the first, it's the only thing I can think of with a deal with the devil where there's not this payoff. So for the person making the deal, so we're never told that, like, the previous, like, Nick Goodson's ancestors, like, burning in hell now because they made this deal with the devil or anything. It just seems to be the payoff is just to kill Shadesides, which is not really a payoff for them. So that's quite interesting. That it's just, like, kind of this, like, really great deal. It seems like. I don't know. I didn't know the devil made such good deals.
Yeah, but, like, he's good.
I mean, it feels like it's, to echo your point, Azar, from before, that this is a better deal for the devil than it is for the goods, because they're basically just having their regular 9-to-5 jobs, like, not asking for too much. They just want, like, oh, can my family just be well off in this small town that we live in, and we'll live in for the rest of our lineage. We don't want to be president, we don't want to be rich, we don't want to be immortal, nothing, like, really good. And then instead they just keep giving them, like, free souls.
They've not watched Death Becomes Her, have they? They don't realise they could be having, like, eternal beauty and massive riches.
So they're just, like, the devil's really ripping them off, I think.
Maybe that's it. But, like, kind of, but it's also just, like, they're still not really paying any consequences.
Yeah,
that's
what I really
love with, like, deals with the devil is usually it's like it's a big choice, because you're, like, definitely going to have to give something up. Something is going to be hard for you down the line. And for generations of, like, the goods, it's nothing. It's fine. They're just, like, having nice lives. So I'm like, this is like, how have you got this deal?
And where do I get it?
Where did you find this deal? But yeah, I guess it's also, like, it's even more frustrating that they found it so hard to make. He found it so hard. The fucking weak link in the chain of goods, found it so hard to maintain. He had one job, which was to be normal and like hide the fact that like, you know, he's doing devil stuff, and he's managed to fuck it up. But like, yeah, it's just like you just had this like really simple, great deal, it seems like, which is unusual. As like, have you ever watched a film? This never happens. Like,
Exactly.
live it up. Like, just do a good job of covering your track. And he's a cop. You feel like of all the people in the position to make sure that no one actually finds out the details of any of this. Like the fact that he brings back the mole killer, which I think is a key element to why it fucks up so bad. He brings back the most recent to go after them. And I'm like, why wouldn't you bring up one? Like, why not bring back the preacher? Which maybe no one's gonna, one of the more obscure ones. Like, you've brought back the guy that these kids knew from school that they know got a shot in the head. Like, I don't know. He really was a weak link. I just can't go over it. But yeah, I quite like the supernatural thing. Like, I think like Alison was saying, you don't really get both a lot. And it
done well.
Successfully like wove like so many things like that feels like they shouldn't work together, but somehow did. Even them coming back to life was done really well. Even the fact that you knew when they were all stabbing each other, it was just a distraction for a moment because it wasn't actually going to kill anyone. Even the way it needed to be stopped, like, you know, there's the thing about her bones, which were in play, but then also there's that gross thing in the tunnels, which if you touch it is something, and that's what all the killers come back from.
Mass.
That really gross, like, like horrible flesh mass. But actually it was just killing Nick that stopped it. But the fact that it's all still there, I don't know, it could so easily be brought back. I don't know, it's like really, because even at the very end, right, you have that bit where someone takes a book, right? So the idea, which is very keeping of like the slashers of the 90s and stuff, of like, oh, you think it's over, but not really. Like, it could all happen again. It leaves it open. And I love that, someone else could just do that. Yes, they figured out how to stop this particular cycle, but there's nothing to stop someone from just doing it again.
And that's so seeded, isn't it? It's like, so we know that if this goes well, we're going to get Ruby's story. You know, that person took the book, and we're going to see some of these other killers that we didn't get to see them in flashback. They're coming. They're so coming. As long as Netflix is happy with this, we need to see Ruby's story. Then it's all seeded. It's all seeded for us, isn't it? To keep it going.
There's so much that you could. They've given themselves so much to work with. Like, I really hope if they do this, I need to see what happened to that kid. Like, honest to God, like, I will actually throw something if I don't see that story. But yeah, I think it ties in really, really well, and I think it still works in a certain like lore. So the fact that they figure it out is because it works within something that we understand. So they're like, oh, so these are things that need to happen. Actually, these are the rules the killers are following. These are the rules we need to follow. These are the things we need to correct. So I think it works really well because it still works within parameters. It has parameters. It's not just like, oh, anything can happen. It's going to be like crazy and we're going to do stuff that just doesn't make any sense. It's just like, no, there's still rules you recognize, but there's just a lot of them.
And I feel like it's a sign, really, that the people who have made this know what they're doing with horror. Like, so many times you see horror films where people are like, oh, we can shoot that cheaply and fast. We don't need many special effects. We'll just do horror. It'll be fine. There's only like 3 stories. And it's always shit. And what you need to do is like have people who love it and who understand all the different genres and understand the importance of the rules. Like, you can give us the initial rules. They can be anything you like Nick Good could fly or whatever. We won't care. Like, you could set them up at the beginning, but then you have to follow them through. And they understand how important it is to set up the rules, set up the world, and then let it all play out till its conclusion. And there's no circumventing the rules, or they went in one portal so they can't come back through it, or nonsense, nonsense to complicate things. There's just a recognition that the rules are important and they have to see them through to the end.
And to start wrapping up kind of this conversation, now that we've all seen all 3 films, and this will be coming out on the Saturday after the last Fear Street films comes out. So I wanted to ask you, kind of with a little bit of hindsight of not just having seen all the films, but also seeing them being released every Friday for the past 3 weeks, and kind of the cultural reaction to it. What do you make of structuring it this way and of separating it, this one big giant story, into 3 distinct films and releasing them in this way, kind of across 3 weeks on Fridays?
Well, I really liked it because it kind of feels like the structure of the story anyway. If you see what I mean, like the whole point is that it's linked through time, like the things that happened to these kids in the 90s. It's like, well, there are reasons and they're linked through all these other like things that happened. So I really like that it's kind of structured like that. That it's like, well, yeah, because we have to go back a step, and then we have to go back an even further step to explain how we even got here. And yeah, I quite like that it gives you space to kind of think about that. And like consider like I wasn't when we talked about the first film. I had no idea clearly what was going to happen in the end, right? So I didn't even know that like we were going to see the Axemen in the I didn't even know he came from the 70s. Like it was there was like all these things that like, oh my god, and that's who that is. And so there's so many things to link back to. And I think it's one of those things, you'll watch them all once, like you were saying, Alison, and then in like a month or so, you'll want to watch them all together maybe in a row, because there's lots of stuff that then you would have missed that connects it back to something else. And I also love that you see the town change. So like in 94, that tree's in the mall, right? The tree that they hang Sarah from. In 78, it's in the camp. That they tie Ziggy to, and then in 66 is obviously where they hang Sarah Fear. So it's just I love it that there's all these connections, like even the bits of the tunnel that come up in certain places, it comes up under the toilets in the camp and like under the mess. Like I love that it's all so interwoven. You get to see like, oh, there's still that entrance there, and that makes sense because that was there in this film and this film and this film. I love that about it. And you only realize how connected it is at the end. You're like, oh, that's how they can get there in the mall, and that's how they can do all this stuff, because it's all just, and it makes it feel like, oh, this is really all the same place. I think you very rarely get that feeling of like, this is really set in the same place, just through like massive shifts in time. So I think it works really well, personally.
I'm really geeky about story development, so I'd love to know like more about the history of how this came out, like if it was first envisaged as 3 films, because I found it very satisfying watching it. Well, I watched them, closer than a week and a week and a week, obviously, but that's how they're set up now, and I liked watching them like that, streaming on demand, and knowing that I could repeatedly rewatch them. I don't know, I assume they wouldn't have written them quite like this if they were just definitely going to have a straight theatrical release, because I'm not sure if I would have felt as satisfied. It felt important, in each viewing, it felt important to me that I could watch them quite quickly one after each other and go back and replay. And I'd just love to know more about like the different iterations of the script and the ideas, because it is like one massive story. And to me, it's like it is a story set in the 90s, and like we were talking about it, weren't we, Anna? Like you're saying, it's essentially in the 90s, and there's 2 big flashbacks, and I love that, but it isn't what I thought it was going to be, and I don't know if it necessarily is actually 3 films, or whether it's a big story that's released over 3 weeks. And so because I'm all obsessed with scripts and stories, I'm like, how did they come to this? Was this a plan from the beginning? What did they do originally? How did this evolve? When it came to Netflix, is that when they put the bridging bits at the beginning and the end? Was the 90s always popping backwards and forwards? This is the kind of stuff that I get like down a rabbit hole with, because I love how story functions. So I'm fascinated by how they have marketed them as 3 films, but equally, and it makes sense, But equally, they could have marketed it as like, 6 40-minute episodes or whatever, and that would have worked as well. So I'm really interested by what they've done here and how it's being marketed and how people are receiving it, because I feel like it's something like new that's happening now. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and I've got some thoughts on that, but actually I have another question for the both of you, prompted by your by what you were saying, Alison. It's like, now that you've seen all of them, now that we've talked, between us and also in general across different outlets and with the culture at large, how do you feel the actual films themselves differ from the way that they were marketed?
That's interesting, because somehow they kept them a surprise. I was genuinely less so in the 1600s in the sense of like, oh, I kind of know where we're going with the story now, a little bit, but like I had no clue. I really thought it was going to be 3 straight slashers. I thought they'd be linked somehow, but I didn't realize it'd be like one story. And it made it like a surprise, like really truly a surprise. I was just like, oh wait, oh, I'm wrong about this. Oh, I didn't know this was going to happen. And like we were saying about the 94 one, the 94 film has like 3 endings. And it's just, it kind of kept me on my toes. I genuinely did not expect the film to be what it was, like, or the 3 films or whatever, like to be what they were. Like, and we were saying in the first one as well, like I really didn't know. It started off with Maya, what's her name? Not Maya Rudolph. Entirely different person. With Heather. Oh my god. It's like Maya Rudolph. She was in it. You missed her. Maya Hawke as Heather at the beginning in the mall, and it's like we said, it's like Scream. It starts off being like, this is what it's going to be, and it's like and it completely flips that and immediately, because you find out who it is. He's shot dead. So you're like, oh, okay, it's going to be slightly different. And then by the end of it, I was like, I really don't know what the plan is here, because they really also make you believe they're like, Sarah's a witch. This is actually what it is. Everyone's cursed. They have to figure out how to break the curse. They let you think that for a really long time. And then they're like, actually, no, also not that. It's Nick Good. So I think it's really clever, because I don't think anyone, unless you are just incredibly clever, was really if they just know the films, I don't think anyone's expecting that to be the case. You might have even figured out that Nick Good is a bad guy, but I don't think you figured out exactly all the details of everything. I feel like it was almost impossible, which I don't know how they did. I think it's actually really smart to have not really given anything away, to just been like, here's 3 new slashers. That's all we're going to tell you. They're all set in these times. Have fun, guys.
Have fun with
that.
I
think it's actually really, like really clever to do that, because fans are really savvy nowadays. Like they'll from trailers, they can figure out so much. Like, so because I was in like the second Fantastic Beasts film, and from the trailer, I'm not in the trailer. From the trailer, fans figured out there's a tiny clip where you see a very faded shot, like for less than a second, of a family tree. From that, fans had screenshotted that and like figured out who I was playing in the film.
I love that.
And I was like, oh my God. like, whoa. So like, if someone's really into something, or people just like can click, they watch enough stuff and like people can figure stuff out. So I think it was really smart how they did it, because I had figured exactly zero out, like from anything that I'd seen or read about it, and I loved it. I love that I was surprised. I love that I didn't really know where I was or what was going on up until it was actually happening. I
don't know how well they necessarily work as standalone films. I think, like, so for like 1666, in the olden times, we're only in there for like 1 hour. And I think like if it finished just with Seraphia like hanging, and you'd be like, oh, Okay, that's a sad indictment of the patriarchal oppressions of Puritan era. And like that would be it, wouldn't it? And I think 78 probably works as a standalone in that, you know, we have Nick Good stood looking into the distance as like the ambulance goes, when we go, oh, he's really not a nice man. So that has more of a standalone element, but for me, like you need the three of them.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I meant about, like, if I went to see this at the cinema as a film, knowing there was another one coming out the following week, there's something I think about seeing it in a theatrical release. It'd be fine now. Now I've seen them, I would love to see this in the cinema now. But if I was going in cold, I'd come away and I'd be like, oh, like I'm not really sure. But what works is the fact it's just like a giant serialized time hopping story, isn't it? But it's one big thing. I'm sure you have thoughts on this, Anna.
I mean, I kind of agree with both of you. I think it was really, really clever, smart positioning and marketing.
Yes.
Because they pitched it as essentially 3 distinct standalone slashers set in different periods, or like 3 distinct horror films set in different periods, but also kind of connected. So my idea going in was that they might be like a shared theme or a shared vibe, but they would work individually. And I think the first 2 definitely work. Like you can watch them and be fine, like you're satisfied. They do have a sort of a finality to them, a great cliffhanger, but you could watch those 2 films and not watch the rest. Why would you though? But I think they are kind of from the start designed as a whole, and then very cleverly positioned in a way that might attract as many people as possible, because I think the horror fans would lap this up anyway,
of course.
But for a regular kind of viewer who might not be as pop culture obsessed, like the idea of having to watch 3 films, same as the idea of having to watch like 10 hours of a series, is a little bit daunting. It's like, oh, for fuck's sake, like I need to learn like a whole new mythology and all that stuff. Yeah. So the idea of presenting it sort of in film-sized episodes, being like, no, this is a full thing. This is a full adventure. You can have your fun with this one. You don't need to commit to watching the whole 3. You'll get so much more if you do, though. But it still works individually. It's like the same approach to like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's like it always needs to function as an individual film, as a whole, as a part of a bigger story, and then also as a part of a much, much larger universe of stories that goes beyond the individual characters, the individual films, or even the particular franchise to which they belong. So I think it was really, really smart. And honestly, just to echo Azora as well, I was really surprised. In every single film, they kind of managed to both tap into and pander to fan expectations and to horror expectations, while also subverting them. So it was always outsmarting me. Every single one of those films always outsmarted me. So I really love them for that.
Well, that's it. I feel I'm quite pretty like horror literate. You know, this is basically my job. And although it's one of the more obvious ones, as we've discussed, I fully didn't realise grown-up Ziggy was Ziggy. I fully thought it was Cindy, and then I was like, what? Yeah. And, you know, I know how horror works. I have expectations, like Anna was saying, and every single time it did something else that I didn't expect, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm on board with this.
Literally until they confirmed it was Ziggy, I was like, maybe it's, I was like, I can't see how it's Ziggy. And I was even trying to do like the math. I was like, how old would Cindy be? And how old would Ziggy be? Yeah. Like, it was so clever. And I agree with Alison in terms of like, because obviously if this was cinematic as well, if it had a theatrical release, it wouldn't even have been a week by week. It would have been like, here's the first one, next year, here's the second one, which I think wouldn't have worked. I think it works giving you a week in between. I'm glad they didn't release them all at the same time. Yes. I'm glad it's like a week in between, but then they're there on a streaming service where you can go back and rewatch them and find all the things and pick it apart, which you also couldn't do if it was theatrical release. You just be like, oh, I think this happened, or I can't remember. You'd have to wait to. So I think the format actually really works. I think you're right. Especially the last one it's not like a film you could just watch on its own.
It would just be really sad. Anna would love it.
I love my sad bastard horror. You know I do.
But I kind of love that. That's what I mean. I kind of love that they did that they made you think they were going to be these standalone films. And they were like, no, it's one story, actually. And these are flashbacks. Because I thought, like, so in my head, I just thought it was going to be like maybe one killer through all these times. And we were going to go back and see their origin story. It's like how I thought it would potentially be.
Yeah.
But no. No, I was wrong. So yeah, I think it was really clever, and I think it's a really smart way to still give you space and room, and to rather than just like do a big dump and maybe not have everyone watch it because it's a lot. It's daunting to watch 3 films in a row. But then also make it not long enough that you've forgotten the first one, and then to at the end of it have these 3 films that are all there for you. I think it's really clever that they've done it, and I think probably we'll see more people do stuff like that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, like, because I feel like this is going well for them. I feel like Fear Street's going well, and the reactions that I'm seeing online when reviews are really positive. So, because I was always like, I wonder why you haven't done this why haven't they cut it as a TV series? Why have they done this? But I found some of Anna's reasons quite compelling for what works with it. And then now I am just thinking, who's going to see this and think, we could do that? I would love to see how this like changes like, I want to say the form, but I literally mean like the vessel that holds stories together. You know, if this makes people, because of the positive kind of reactions, like you need a really rich text like this. Is like, this really rewards all the repeat viewings, but how this might change the way people think about form. So if you know, in the last kind of 5-10 years, people are aware of streaming and the way that we can have really serialized narratives over 6-12 episodes. But what might we do now with form in terms of film and multiple films, and how much is that borrowing from like TV serialization? It's dead interesting to me. I am quite geeky. So.
It's fascinating from an industrial point of view, which is I think what you're talking about there, Alison, in that it's kind of, I don't think Fear Street as it's been released and told, as the story's been told across these 3 films and marketed and positioned, could exist without the previous like 10-15 years, because it's boiling down, I think, a change in viewing habits. Twofold. On the one hand, like if we think of big franchise films before, and still now, the way that they come out is like you'd get one film. Even, and actually the second one, even though they were sort of greenlit, I'm thinking specifically of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, you'd still have to wait like a year for the next one to come out. So the cycle was very theatrical based, very much kind of structured around cinema releases. And then the big explosion of serialized TV and how that's become kind of the most prestigious place for very good, very intricate storytelling, and has come to really dominate pop culture in a way that has overshadowed even film.
Definitely.
And then plus the rise, as Alison was talking about, of the streaming services, and that completely absorbing the way that people would view things, because it's easy, because it's more affordable, and because they kind of transformed our viewing habits by binge watching. Well, Netflix did, really. And by giving us all the content all at once. And now we're seeing kind of a return to old school serialized television. I feel really weird saying old school, but like more serialized episodic television as opposed to binge watching, but also bringing in the anticipation of franchises that are greenlit, that are presented and written as a whole story, just split up, which is very ambitious storytelling. But now we don't even have to wait that long. We don't have to wait a year. If I had to wait a year between Fear Street 94 and Fear Street 78, I'd probably forget half of the things that happened in the first one.
Exactly.
And now, not only can you rewatch it, like you mentioned, Alison, you also get a recap at the beginning, and you can watch it like the week after. I think that's super. I think that's going to be super interesting for what comes next, because it's like, it's kind of pulling from a lot of the big audience shifts and storytelling shifts from the last 15 years, and trying something that makes sense and also is quite innovative.
It feels really innovative, and it works so well for horror, you know, horror and fantasy, like Isadora was saying. But they have such committed audiences. Like, horror fans, fantasy fans, they go in hard and deep on the stuff that they love. So these are exactly the kinds of genres that you can do this kind of deep, rich storytelling with, and it still works. But you can also gamble to a degree, because that core audience will be there, like regardless of what crazy things you do with story structure. They will still be there and having a go.
And I think it's also like the in the more recent years, the way we've seen like shorter series that and don't intend to have like ever a second season or anything. Like Mare of Easttown did it, Sharp Scratches did it, to a certain extent, the True Detective. It's like, oh, it's too long for a film. And it's not enough for it. So here's 6 episodes, here's like 8 episodes, and we've just told this story, this one story, this story that's it, and we're not going to tell you any more of it. And I actually really love that, and I think people are enjoying that more, where it's like, oh, I get to be in this world for just this finite amount of time. I know when it's going to end. I know this is going to be like 6 weeks and it's going to finish. And I think there's something quite nice about that. We've seen with Fear Street, there's an option to do it with film as well. And to some extent, the Marvel Cinematic Universe kind of did that. But obviously, a lot of those were based on like theatrical releases as well. And it's only since Disney Plus that we can actually go back and watch them. And they're doing stuff with shows and stuff now. But I do feel like people like that feeling of like, oh, okay, I don't have to sit down for a really long, like extended amount of time. I just don't think people have the attention span necessarily anymore.
No.
But then also I know that this is the end of it. It's not just some like thing like gaping into the future. That's going to be like, people also get bored of series. Like they are just a bit like, okay, like when are you going to end this? People aren't very favorable to series that just kind of go on forever with no end in sight. It just feels like, in a way, a kind of a bit like the director or the writers or whatever don't have control of it. It just feels like, oh, they're just going to keep writing as long as we keep watching, which doesn't feel as satisfying as someone going, no, there's an end. I know what the end is. I've written it. And that's what was nice about this. Even though we didn't know what was going on, we 100% knew there was going to be an ending that tied this all together. There was no feeling. And I think if they came out like in longer spaces, like as individual, you'd be like, has that someone written the last film? Or like, you wouldn't know. Whereas with this, you're like, I know this has been filmed. I know that 1666 is done. I know that the characters know how the story ends. There's someone out there who knows how the story ends. And I'm going to get to see it in a couple of weeks.
It's not going to be Game of Thrones all over again.
Oh, God. No, exactly. No. There's not 2 idiots running the show. It's just something nice about it. Like, even though you don't know what's going to happen, knowing you're not going to have to wait too long to find out.
Yeah. Yes. You're in good hands with the storytellers because they know where the story is going.
Yeah.
While at the same time seeding it, so if it all goes really well, we have the satisfaction of a really proper ending, but we've opened up a whole world for 3 more films.
Giving themselves a little wiggle room for like something else.
There's so many years.
So many serial killers.
Fear Street. Like 1751.
Exactly.
Just like random years.
There's a lot of years to choose from, so...
So to wrap up, is there anything that you wanted to mention about Fear Street, about any of the films, the trilogy itself, that perhaps you haven't had a chance to talk about?
My only thing is that I totally love Gillian Jacobs, who plays Ziggy, and I've been obsessed with her since she played Mickey in Love, and I'm just so happy that she popped up again in the 3rd one when I wasn't expecting it. And I could just watch Gillian Jacobs all day. That's my only contribution.
I think I'm there with Ziggy from 78 to the like other films is like probably my favorite character.
Yeah.
Big fan. I'd opt for more Ziggy.
Yes, I agree. Actually, I'm with you.
I hope that's included in everything that goes forward. I also wanted to talk about when they come out of Nick Good's house, right? So the girls have murdered Nick Good. Sam's herself again. They come out all bloodied. They crawl out, Nick Good's basement, where the fuck they are. In Sunnyvale. And I love that because for a moment I was a bit nervous that they came out. I was like, oh shit, they're going to get like arrested. for like murdering Nick Good because no one's going to understand what's happened. Luckily, everyone figures out like Nick's blamed for everything. But I love that they show that things have changed just by like a Sunnyvaler like backing out of their driveway and immediately getting hit by a truck.
Yes!
And that's how you know.
I was like, what was that?
That everything's back to normal because they're like, oh, shit happens here now, actually.
Yep.
And I think it really brought home actually how bad things were in Shadyside and how good they were.
Yeah.
Because you don't really see much of Sunnyvale, right? Like, it's just implied. They have nice houses, but you don't really see what their lives are like in comparison to Shadysiders. And the fact that it's like, so they weren't even getting into car accidents. Like, nothing bad at all was really happening there. And I love that that's how they tell you. Just like
the
big old car. Yeah. So I really love that. And I love that we got that glimpse of it because actually we didn't get to see how the other half lived.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And we didn't even really get to see necessarily what the day-to-day of Shadysiders were like because we start with the murders in the mall. We didn't get to see just the everyday shit that was happening to them, just why their lives were never really going anywhere. We just saw like the really like brutal stuff that happened. So I really love that was the tell. Like it was just like, oh, and then a car accident happens and that's how you know things have gone. And they're all so shocked. Like the reaction of the Sunnyvalers is like, oh, and it's like, yeah, dude. And also what's interesting is that the Sunnyvalers obviously don't know why this has happened to them. To be fair, most of them don't know why their lives are good. They just assume it's because they're like great shiny people. But that's actually really interesting to see the town like even out and for Sunnyvalers to be like, wait, what? Like, I was like, it's kind of unfair. Yeah, because they really didn't know, but
in a satisfying way.
Yeah, like just to see it all like even out and it be like, yeah, you weren't living normal lives and you had a good run, but that's over now.
Yeah, you're done.
I quite like that. Yeah.
Oh, that's a really good observation. Now I'm just thinking, I do wonder, this might be the stupidest thing I've said on this podcast so far, and I've said many stupid things. I wonder if that last car crash was like a sneaky reference to Scary Movie, because Cindy gets run over by a car randomly at the end of that movie.
It is it also happens in Final Destination.
Yes, it does.
Of course.
That's a smarter reference. That's a smarter
reference.
It
also happens in Mean Girls. It's a really fun like thing to, because you're always going to be surprised by like a high speed. Like it's just a good way to shock you. But like,
it's always a bus as well.
Yeah, always a bus. So I think it's just something it's always a good scare. It's always a good like surprise. I don't think I've ever anticipated it in any film it's actually happened. Yeah. So I think it's just like a really good way because it ties us back in like to all these films we love. It just is a way to tie it back to that, even that ending. It coming at the end as well. It comes at the end of most films, right?
Yeah.
So even to tie it back into that thing is just very clever. And again, it just feels like someone who really has a handle on these films, really can just pull references from everywhere with ease. Yeah.
I think that's that. I'm very conscious of your time, so let's wrap it up here. But I just wanted to thank you both for your time and for your insight and for the many myriad of insults you've thrown towards me. I've thoroughly enjoyed that. And for any listeners who might be hearing you for the first time, where can people find more of your work online?
Isara, would you like to go first?
Oh, what a gentleman. You can find me on Twitter at Isara_BB, where I post any of my work. You find me on Instagram at Isorasaurus. And you can also find me like I always forget at this point. It's like the easiest part, and I'm always like, what? You can also find me on the Final Girls website under the Bloody Woman heading for reviews and stuff, but also my column Bloody Perfect.
Which is so good. Good work there.
It's very good.
Thank you.
I'm on Instagram at Alison Pierce, which is ALISONPEIRSE, or my website alisonpierce.com, which is where you can read all about my book called Women Make Horror, which is all about women making horror films and feminism. So it's extremely appropriate for this podcast.
And you can also subscribe to Alison's newsletter, The Losers Club, on there.
Oh, thank you, Annie. I forgot about that. Yes, please do that. Do that as well. Thank you.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.